You don't need to pay attention to any of this. Nothing important is going to happen here. You can let your mind wander wherever it wants to go, or you can listen for a while and then drift away completely. Either way is fine. There's nothing to remember and nothing to follow. This is just a gentle movement through space, and space is mostly empty and quiet, so there's very little to notice at all. Right now, imagine you're moving slowly through the darkness between stars. Not traveling quickly, just drifting at a pace so slow it barely feels like movement. The darkness here isn't frightening or heavy. It's just dark, the way a room is dark at night when you're comfortable and safe. There's nothing nearby. The nearest star might be years of distance away, even at this slow drifting pace, and that's perfectly ordinary for space. Most off-space is this kind of emptiness. The darkness continues in every direction. If you were to look around, you'd see mostly black, with perhaps a few very faint points of light scattered so far apart they barely register. These distant stars aren't bright or dramatic. They're just there, flickering slightly, the way distant things often appear to flicker when you're tired and your eyes aren't quite focused. Some of them might be slightly blue, others might have a pale yellow quality, but the colors are so faint they're almost not colors at all. You continue drifting. Time passes, though it's hard to say how much time. Minutes could be hours here. Hours could be days. There's no way to measure it and no reason to measure it. The darkness remains the same. The distance remains vast. Every direction looks similar to every other direction. There's a kind of sameness to it all that makes it easy to let your thoughts blur and soften. Far off to one side, there might be a very dim glow, so faint you're not even sure it's there. It could be a distant galaxy, a collection of billions of stars so far away they've blurred into a soft smudge of light. Or it might be nothing at all, just your eyes creating patterns in the dark. It doesn't move. It doesn't change. It just sits there in the distance, barely visible, not asking for attention. The space around you is cold, but you don't feel it. You're simply observing, drifting, noticing, or not noticing. Temperature doesn't quite exist in the way you normally think of it when you're just imagining yourself here. There's only this slow movement and the quiet darkness, and the sense of being nowhere in particular. You pass through a region where there's a slight difference in the darkness, as if the black has become a very slightly different shade of black. Perhaps there's some dust here, particles so small and spread so far apart they wouldn't even fill a room if you gathered them all together. They don't reflect light because there's no light nearby to reflect. They're just there, invisible, making no difference to anything. Time continues to pass. You're still drifting. The motion is so gradual you can't really feel it as motion. It's more like the sense of time moving forward while you're lying very still. Behind you, if there is a behind, there's the same darkness you're moving through now. Ahead of you, if there is an ahead, there's more darkness, more distance, more of this quiet emptiness that fills most of the universe. Occasionally, over long stretches of time, you might notice another faint point of light. It doesn't suddenly appear. It's been there all along, just too faint to notice until now, or perhaps you simply weren't looking in that direction. The light is steady and dim. It might be red, which usually means it's an older, cooler star, burning through its fuel slowly and quietly. Or it might be white, which is more common, a middle-aged star like so many others scattered through the galaxy. Nothing about it seems urgent or important. The distance to that star is difficult to imagine. If you were to try to count the miles, you would need to count for a very long time, and the number would be large enough that it stops meaning anything specific. Distance in space becomes more of a feeling than a measurement. Far away, very far away, farther than that. These are thin line descriptions that make sense after a while. You keep moving through the emptiness. There's no sound here. Sound needs air or some medium to travel through, and space has almost nothing in it. A few atoms scattered across each cubic meter, but not enough to carry any vibration. The silence is complete. Not the silence of a quiet room where you can still hear your own breathing or the settling of a house, but true silence, the absence of any possibility of sound. It's restful in a way. There's nothing to listen for, nothing to hear. Just this ongoing quiet that stretches in all directions. The darkness continues. You might see a cluster of stars ahead, or what appears to be a cluster. As you drift closer, over what might be years or might be minutes in this imagined time, you realize they're not actually close to each other. They just appear close from this angle. One star might be much nearer than another, but they line up from your perspective. The farther star might be twice as distant as the nearer one, but both are so far away the difference barely matters. They share this small region of sky, these faint points of light, neither one affecting the other. There's dust between the stars sometimes. Not clouds that you could see, but a thin scattering of particles left over from old stars that exhausted themselves long ago. These particles drift just like you're drifting, moving in slow currents created by gravity and radiation pressure from distant suns. A particle might travel for millions of years without encountering anything else. It moves through the dark, patient and silent, going nowhere in particular. You notice the darkness itself seems to have a quality to it, though it's hard to describe. It's not menacing and it's not peaceful. It's simply there, neutral, unchanging. The kind of darkness that doesn't ask anything of you. You can look at it or through it or not look at all. You can close your eyes and the darkness continues. You can open them and see the same darkness. There's a sameness to it that's almost soothing. Another star appears ahead, this one perhaps slightly brighter than the others you've passed, though still verbatim. The light from it left that star years ago, traveling at a speed that seems fast but takes years to cross the distances out here. The light has been traveling through empty space all that time, moving through the dark, dimming slightly as it spreads out across the vastness. By the time you see it, the star might have changed slightly, or it might be exactly the same. There's no way to know. You're seeing the past, but the past looks very much like the present out here. The star doesn't grow larger as you approach it in this slow drift. Or if it does grow, it grows so slowly over such a long time that you don't notice. It remains a point, a faint dot of light in the distance. The distance to it is still enormous, even though you've been drifting toward it for a while now. Space is large enough that movement barely matters. You can move for a lifetime and still be surrounded by mostly the same emptiness. There might be other things out here, invisible things you're drifting past without knowing. Dark matter, which doesn't interact with light and can't be seen directly. It's here in the space around you, scattered through the universe, more common than regular matter, but completely imperceptible. It might as well not exist at all from the perspective of someone just trying to rest and let their mind wander. It changes nothing about the darkness or the quiet or the slow movement. You continue. The stars you passed earlier are behind you now, growing dimmer with distance, fading back into the general darkness. The star ahead remains ahead, barely any closer than before. There's no sense of progress because progress doesn't mean much when the distances are so vast. Moving or not moving feels about the same. Being here or there feels about the same. There's only the ongoing presence of space around you, dark and quiet and very, very empty. Sometimes the darkness seems darker in one direction than another, though this might just be your perception shifting. Perhaps there's a region ahead with fewer stars, a direction where the galaxy thins out even more than usual. Or perhaps your eyes are adjusting, finding different patterns in the randomness. The darkness is dark enough that small changes in darkness don't make much difference. You might pass near a nebula at some point, though near is a relative term. It could be light years away and still the closest thing around. Nebulas are clouds of gas and dust where new stars sometimes form, but they're not bright or colorful like photographs make them seem. Those images are enhanced, exaggerated, made dramatic for viewing. In reality, most nebulas are so faint you could be inside one and barely notice. The gas is spread so thin, the particles so far apart, that it's almost the same as empty space, just slightly less empty. The darkness and the distance continue in their usual way. There's more space ahead, more darkness, more off thy slow drifting through nothing in particular. The stars are scattered around in their random patterns, each one burning quietly, most of them with no planets, or if they have planets, those planets are cold and dark and empty, circling their star in silence year after year. You're still moving, still drifting. Or perhaps you've stopped and are just floating here, motionless relative to the distant stars. It's hard to tell. Motion and stillness feel similar when there's nothing nearby to compare yourself to. The darkness remains. The quiet continues. The distance stretches out in every direction, more distance than you could travel in many lifetimes. Another point of light is visible now, off to one side. This one seems slightly orange, a cool star burning steadily. It's been there for billions of years probably, and it will be there for billions more, shining its dim light into the void. The light spreads out in all directions, growing weaker and weaker as it travels, until it's so faint it barely exists at all. Most of its light will travel forever through empty space, never hitting anything, never being seen by anyone. The emptiness here is profound but not oppressive. It's just empty the way most of the universe is empty. Matter is rare. Stars are scattered far apart. The space between things is vast. This is the normal state of the cosmos, this quiet darkness with occasional points of light distributed so sparsely they hardly interrupt the dark at all. You drift past regions where there's nothing visible at all, not even the faintest star. Just pure darkness extending in every direction. These gaps between the visible stars are the most common parts of space. If you were to pick a random location in the universe, you would almost certainly end up in one of these dark regions, far from anything else, surrounded by emptiness. This is where most of space actually is. Time continues in its strange way out here. It might have been hours since this drifting started, or it might have been moments. The darkness makes time feel different. Without change, without landmarks, time becomes abstract. It passes, but passing doesn't mean much. You're here now and now and now, and each now is similar to the last one, dark and quiet and empty. There's a very faint glow far ahead, almost too faint to see. It might be a distant cluster of stars, hundreds or thousands of them grouped together by gravity, their combined light making a soft smudge against the dark. Or it might be something else, something farther away. A distant galaxy perhaps. The light from a galaxy can travel for millions of years before reaching this spot where you're drifting, and by the time it arrives it's so weak, so diminished, that it barely registers at all. The darkness around that faint glow is especially dark, making the glow seem slightly brighter by contrast. Beauty's still very faint. You could look away and look back and not be sure if you're seeing the same glow or a different one. The darkness plays tricks sometimes, creating impressions of light where there might be nothing. Your mind fills in patterns. It's what minds do when there's very little to observe. You continue moving through this region of space. The motion is so slow and steady it feels like not moving at all. The stars don't shift position in any noticeable way. The darkness doesn't change. There's just this ongoing drift through emptiness, this gentle movement that could continue forever without anything significant happening. Behind you now, if you were to look back, you'd see more of the same darkness you're moving through. The stars you passed are still there, just as faint as they were before, perhaps slightly fainter now with added distance. There's no trail marking where you've been. Space doesn't hold traces like that. You pass through it and it closes behind you, unchanged as if you were never there. Another star is visible ahead, this one white, steady, unremarkable. It's a common type of star, burning at moderate temperature, neither especially hot nor especially cool. There are billions of stars like this once scattered through the galaxy. This particular star has been burning for a long time and will continue burning for a long time more. It doesn't know you're drifting past. It doesn't interact with you in any way. It just continues doing what stars do, converting mass to energy, shining dimly into the surrounding darkness. The space between you and that star is filled with almost nothing. A few atoms per cubic meter. Some particles of dust scattered here and there. Occasional photons of light passing through, traveling from distant sources. But mostly there's just empty space, the fabric of spacetime itself, curved slightly by the presence of matter but mostly flat and featureless. You drift through this emptiness. The darkness wraps around you in all directions. It's not pressing in or closing around you. It's just there, present, surrounding everything. The kind of darkness that's easy to relax into because it doesn't demand anything. It doesn't need you to understand it or appreciate it. It simply exists, dark and quiet and vast. More time passes. The star ahead remains ahead. Other stars are scattered around at various distances, some slightly brighter, most much dimmer, all of them very far away. The nearest one might be years of travel away even at very high speeds. At this slow drifting pace, the nearest star might as well be forever away. Distance and time blend together out here. Far and long become the same concept. There's dust drifting through this region, though you can't see it. Tiny particles, each one a fragment of something that existed long ago. A star that exploded perhaps, scattering its matter across space. Or just the original material left over from when this region of space first formed, billions of years ago. The dust moves slowly, influenced by gravity from distant objects, pushed gently by starlight. It goes nowhere in particular. There's nowhere to go. The darkness continues. You might notice a very faint band of light across one section of sky, so faint it's barely there. This could be the edge of the galaxy seen from inside, billions of stars so far away they blur together into a soft glow. Or it might be something else. An illusion created by tired eyes. A reflection of nothing in particular. It doesn't matter much either way. It's just a faint impression in the distance, not bright enough to interrupt the darkness. You're still drifting. The motion continues in its gentle, nearly imperceptible way. There's no destination ahead, no reason to arrive anywhere. Just this ongoing movement through dark space, through regions where nothing much happens and nothing much has ever happened. The stars burn quietly. The darkness remains dark. Time passes in its strange, elastic way. Another region of especially dark space is ahead now. No visible stars in that direction, just pure blackness. You drift toward it or through it, and the darkness deepens slightly, or seems to deepen. Perhaps there's less dust in this region to scatter the faint starlight. Perhaps the stars are distributed differently here, with a gap in the random pattern. The darkness doesn't feel different though. It's still the same neutral darkness, neither welcoming nor unwelcoming, just present. Far off to one side, there might be a very faint flash of light, so brief you're not sure you saw it. Perhaps a distant star flared slightly, releasing a burst of radiation. Or perhaps a piece of rock struck another piece of rock somewhere far away, creating a brief spark. Or perhaps you imagined it. In the darkness, with so little to see, the mind sometimes creates events that didn't happen, a flash that wasn't there, a star that doesn't exist. It makes not a difference. The darkness returns to its normal state almost immediately. You continue. The emptiness continues. The quiet continues. There's a sameness to it all that makes it easy to let your attention drift away. You can stop paying attention entirely and nothing will change. The darkness will still be dark. The space will still be empty. The drifting will continue whether you're aware of it or not. More stars are scattered ahead, distributed randomly across the darkness. None of them are close. None of them are bright. They're just there, marking different points in space, each one surrounded by its own vast sphere of emptiness. Some might have planets circling them. Most probably don't. Either way, those planets are dark and cold and far away, going around and around their star in patient orbits that take years or decades to complete. The darkness between these stars is filled with nothing that you can see or detect. It's just space, empty space, the most common thing in the universe. If you were to gather up all the matter in the universe and spread evenly through all the space, each region of space would still be almost entirely empty. Matter is rare, emptiness is normal. You're drifting through the normal state of things, the quiet emptiness that fills most of existence. Time keeps passing. You might have been drifting for minutes or hours. There's no way to tell and no reason total. The darkness doesn't mark time. The stars don't move in any noticeable way. There's just this ongoing present moment that feels like it could last forever. Now and now and now, each moment the same as the last, dark and quiet and empty. You pass near another star, though near still means very far away. This star might be light years distant. It's light aching years to reach you even though light travels faster than anything else. The light looks steady and dim. It doesn't flicker or change. It just shines in its constant way, pouring energy out into the void. Most of that energy traveling forever through darkness without ever hitting anything. The space around that star is probably empty too. There might be a few planets there or there might not. If there are planets, they're small and dark and you can't see them from here. They don't give off any light of their own, they just orbit their star silently year after year in the darkness. Nothing happens on those planets, or if things happen, they happen slowly and quietly without any drama or urgency. You drift onward. The darkness remains constant. The quiet never breaks. There's just this ongoing movement through space, through emptiness, through the vast distances between things. The universe is mostly made of this emptiness. Stars and planets and galaxies are rare exceptions, tiny islands of matter in an ocean of dark space. You're drifting through the ocean, through the normal state of things, through the quiet that fills most of reality. Another faint light appears ahead. Not a star this time, or not just a star. Perhaps it's a binary system, two stars orbiting each other, both of them dim, their light blending together from this distance. They circle each other slowly over years or decades, bound together by gravity, moving through space together. But from here they look like a single point of light, faint and steady, no different from any other star. The darkness around them extends in all directions. There's nothing else nearby. The next nearest star might be years away from them. They're alone in their small region of space, just as everything out here is alone. Isolation is the normal state. The distances are so vast that even though there are billions of stars, each one is essentially alone in its own sphere of emptiness. You're still moving, still drifting. The motion continues in its patient way, carrying you through the dark at a pace so slow it barely counts as movement. Behind you, the stars you've passed remain where they were, unchanged. Ahead of you, new stars wait in the distance, faint and dim and far away. There's always more space ahead, always more darkness, always more of this quiet emptiness stretching onward. Far off in another direction, there's a very faint glow, so faint you have to look away to see it. When you look directly at it, it disappears. When you look slightly to the side, it becomes barely visible again. This is how the faintest lights appear, easier to see with peripheral vision than direct sight. The glow might be a distant galaxy or a cluster of stars or just an illusion created by your eyes. It doesn't move. It doesn't change. It's just there or not there depending on how you look. The darkness continues in all directions, deep, quiet darkness. The kind of darkness that doesn't feel heavy or oppressive, just dark, empty, still. There's nothing threatening in it, nothing waiting in it. Just more space, more emptiness, more of this vast quiet that fills the universe. You drift through another region where there's nothing visible at all. No stars, no glow, just pure darkness. This might be a gap between the spiral arms of the galaxy, a region where stars form less frequently, or it might just be a random empty patch in the distribution of stars. Space is random like that. Stars cluster in some places and leave gaps in others. There's no pattern to it, no design. Just randomness spread across vast distances. Time continues. The darkness continues. The drifting continues. There's a rhythm to it all, though rhythm isn't quite the right word. More like an ongoing sameness, a continuity of dark and quiet and empty. Nothing changes dramatically. Nothing happens suddenly. There's just this slow, gentle movement through space that could continue forever. Another star becomes visible ahead. This one is slightly red, an old star burning cool and dim. It's been burning for billions of years, slowly exhausting its fuel. It might continue burning for billions more years, or it might fade soon, on the cosmic timescale where soon means millions of years. It doesn't matter much. The star will shine until it doesn't, and the darkness will remain either way. The light from that star is very old. It left the star's surface years ago and has been traveling through space ever since, moving through the emptiness at the speed of light. Most of the light that star produces never hits anything. It just travels outward forever, growing weaker and weaker as it spreads across larger and larger regions of space, until it's so faint it might as well not exist. You're drifting past that star now, or toward it, or away from it. The motion is too slow and the distance is too vast to tell. The star remains in roughly the same position in the sky, a faint red dot against the darkness. It doesn't change. It doesn't interact with you. You pass each other like two particles in the void, each one going their own way, neither one affecting the other. The darkness wraps around everything again as you move away from that star, or as it moves away from you. The distinction doesn't matter. There's just more darkness ahead, more emptiness, more of this quiet region off space where nothing much happens and nothing much will ever happen. The universe is full of these regions. They're the most common places, the normal places. The quiet places where time passes slowly and nothing disturbs the dark. You continue drifting. The stars continue shining in their distant way. The darkness continues being dark. There's a simplicity to it all that makes it easy to let go, to stop paying attention, to let your mind wander away entirely. The space doesn't need you to observe it. It exists the same way whether you're watching or not. Dark and quiet and empty, patient and still and vast. Another stretch of emptiness opens up ahead. No stars visible in this direction for a while, just darkness extending outward. You move through it slowly or you remain still while it moves past you. The distinction has stopped mattering. There's just the presence of this dark space surrounding you, neutral and calm. It doesn't press against you or pull at you. It's simply there being what it is. Dark, empty, quiet. The silence out here has a particular quality. It's not the silence of a room at night where you might hear the faint hum of electricity or the settling of a building. It's absolute silence. No vibrations, no sound waves, nothing moving through any medium because there's no medium to move through. Just the stillness of space, which is so still it doesn't even register as stillness. It's the absence of sound in a way that feels completely neutral. Time passes in its unclear way. You might have been here for a long while now, or it might have been only a short time. The darkness doesn't give any clues. The stars you can see haven't shifted. The emptiness remains the same. There's just this ongoing present, this now that continues and continues without marking itself as separate moments. It all blends together into one long, quiet stretch of dark space. You notice a star off in the distance, very faint, barely there. It might be yellow, or it might just appear yellow because of the way your eyes are processing the low light. The star doesn't draw attention to itself. It's just another point in the darkness, one of countless points scattered through the galaxy, each one far from the others, each one burning in its own solitary space. The distance to that star is enormous in any practical sense, but out here in space, it's just another distance. Not particularly special, not particularly close or far, just somewhere else in the vastness. If you were to drift toward it, you would drift for a very long time before it grew any larger or brighter. And even then, it might only become slightly less faint, still a point of light, still distant. You keep moving through the emptiness, or the emptiness keeps moving past you. The darkness continues taj around you in all directions, above, below, to the sides. Though these directions don't mean much in space where there's no up or down. Just various directions, all of them leading to more darkness, more distance, more quiet space. There might be a few particles drifting past you right now, invisible and undetectable. Atoms of hydrogen perhaps, or traces of helium, the most common elements in the universe. They're spread so thinly through space that you could drift for a long time before encountering even a handful of them. They don't cluster together. They don't interact much. They just exist, scattered through the void, each atom on its own journey through the darkness. Another star appears in your field of view, or perhaps you've just noticed it now. This one is white, steady, unremarkable. It looks the same as many other stars you've passed or noticed, just a faint point of light in the distance. There's nothing distinctive about it, no particular brightness, no unusual color. It's simply there, being a star, doing what stars do, burning steadily in the dark. The darkness between you and that star contains nothing you can perceive, just space, just distance. The kind of emptiness that's hard to think about because there's nothing there to think about. It's not full of anything. It's empty in a dramatic way. It's just empty in the most ordinary, unremarkable sense. Space with nothing in it. You continue your slow drift. The motion, if there is motion, remains gentle and barely perceptible. You might be moving through space, or space might be still and you're simply existing within it. The darkness doesn't change with movement. It looks the same regardless. Black in all directions, with occasional faint stars scattered at vast distances. Time continues to be strange out here. It passes, you can sense that much, but it doesn't pass in any measurable way. There are no events to mark time. No changes to indicate one moment from another. Just this ongoing present that feels stretched out, elongated, as if time itself has become thin and slow. Hours could pass and feel like minutes, or minutes could feel like hours. There's no way to know. Another region of pure darkness is ahead, or maybe you're in it now. No stars visible in any direction you look, just blackness, deep, neutral blackness. It doesn't feel ominous. It doesn't feel comforting either. It just feels like darkness. The absence of light. The presence of space. Nothing more complicated than that. You drift through this darkness and it stays dark. The emptiness remains empty. The quiet continues without interruption. There's a consistency to it that makes it easy to let your mind rest. Nothing is demanding your attention. Nothing is changing in ways that require notice. The darkness simply is, and you're simply here, drifting through it or resting within it. Far away, at a distance that's hard to estimate, there might be a very faint smudge of light. It could be a galaxy, billions of stars so distant they've blurred into a soft glow. Or it could be a closer cluster of stars, still far away but not as far as a galaxy. From here, it's impossible to tell. The light is so faint that it barely registers. You could look away and forget it was there. You could keep looking and it wouldn't become any clearer. The space between you and that distant light is filled with more of this same emptiness. Dark space stretching in and on. No obstacles, no interruptions, just vast distances of nothing in particular. This is how most of space is: empty, dark, quiet. Stretching between the rare points of light where stars exist, you're still drifting or still resting or some combination of both. The distinction has become unclear. There's just this ongoing experience of being in space, surrounded by darkness, with time passing in its vague way. The stars that are visible remain in their positions. The darkness remains dark. Nothing shifts or changes in any noticeable way. Another star becomes faintly visible, this one with a slightly orange tint. It's far away like all the others. Just another point of light in the vastness. It's been there for a long time, burning steadily, releasing light that travels outward in all directions. Most of that light will never reach anything. It will just travel forever through emptiness, growing fainter and fainter until it disperses completely into the dark. The darkness around that star extends outward in all directions. There's probably nothing else near it, not companion stars or planets that you can see. Just that single point of light, alone in its region of space, surrounded by vast spheres of emptiness. This is the common condition of stars. They're separated by such enormous distances that even though there are billions of them, each one exists in essential isolation. You drift onward through the dark. The motion is so slow and constant it doesn't feel like motion anymore. It's more like a state of being. You're here in the darkness, and the darkness is here around you, and time passes while you rest in this space. The stars continue their distant shining. The emptiness continues its presence. Everything remains much the same as it was before. There's a quality to this darkness that's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It simply exists. It's not pushing against you or pulling you anywhere. It's not welcoming or rejecting. It's neutral space, dark and empty, extending in all directions without preference or purpose. You can rest here without resistance. You can let your attention fade without consequence. Another stretch of time passes, impossible to measure. The darkness hasn't changed. The few stars you can see remain in their same positions, faint points scattered across the black. There's no sense of progress or movement, no feeling of arriving anywhere or leaving anywhere. Just the ongoing experience of being in space, drifting or resting, existing within this vast quiet. You might notice another star now, or it might be the same star you noticed before. It's hard to keep track. They all look similar from these distances. Faint, dim, far away. This one might be white or pale yellow. The light is so weak it's difficult to determine. It doesn't matter much. The star is just there, distant and unremarkable, one of countless others. The space between you and that star contains the usual nothing, empty space. A few scattered atoms, perhaps too dispersed to form anything, too isolated to interact. Just the basic fabric of space itself, curved slightly by gravity but mostly flat, mostly featureless. The kind of emptiness that defines most of the cosmos. You continue your gentle drift through this region. The darkness remains your primary companion, surrounding you, extending infinitely in all directions. It's not a heavy darkness, not an oppressive one, just dark, the absence of light, the presence of empty space, nothing more complex or mysterious than that. Time moves forward in its strange, unmeasurable way. You've been here in the darkness for a while now, or maybe not very long at all. It's impossible to say. The lack of change makes time feel elastic, stretched thin, almost absent. There's just now and now and now, each moment bleeding into the next without clear boundaries. Another faint point of light appears in the distance. Another star. This one is dim, barely visible, easily overlooked. It sits in the darkness like all the others, far away, unreachable at this slow pace. The light from it has been traveling for years to reach this point where you are, and it's so diminished by the journey that it barely qualifies as light anymore. Just a faint suggestion of brightness against the dark. The darkness around that star is the same darkness surrounding you. It's all connected, all one continuous space, dark and empty and vast. The star interrupts that darkness only slightly, only locally. Beyond it, the darkness continues. Before it, the darkness continues. The star is just a small exception in an overwhelming rule of emptiness. You drift past regions that have no stars at all, pure darkness extending in every direction. These are the most common regions of space, the places between the stars, the vast expanses where nothing exists except space itself. You move through this darkness or rest within it, and it makes no difference to the darkness. It remains unchanged by your presence, dark and empty as it has always been. Another long stretch of time passes. The darkness continues. The silence continues. The emptiness continues. There's a sameness to it all that makes it easy to let your thoughts drift away. You don't need to pay attention to any of this. Nothing important is happening. Nothing requires your notice. The darkness will remain dark whether you observe it or not. You might see another star ahead, or to the side, or behind. The directions blur together out here. Up, down, forward, back, they're all the same, just different directions into the same darkness. The star, if there is one, is faint and distant like all the others, just another point of light in the vast dark. Burning quietly, going about its business of being a star, the space continues. The darkness continues. The quiet continues. There's no end to it, no boundary where the darkness stops or the emptiness concludes. It just goes on, dark and quiet and empty, the normal state of most of the universe. You're drifting through it or resting in it, existing within this vast, peaceful nothing. Time passes. Stars remain distant. Darkness remains dark. Everything continues in its gentle, unchanging way. You can let go completely now. There's nothing here that needs your attention, nothing happening that requires notice. Just the ongoing presence of dark space, quiet and empty and endlessly patient, continuing whether you observe it or not. The emptiness stretches on in all directions. You drift through it, or perhaps you're motionless and the emptiness simply exists around you. The distinction has become meaningless. There's just this space, this darkness, this ongoing quiet that fills everything. No stars visible right now. No light. Just the dark, extending infinitely, wrapping around you in its neutral way. Time continues its vague passage. You might have been here for a very long while, or perhaps only briefly. The darkness gives no indication either way. It remains constant, unchanging, a backdrop that doesn't shift or evolve. The emptiness persists in its usual fashion, neither growing nor shrinking, just present in all directions. Another star appears somewhere in the distance, faint and unremarkable, white or slightly yellow, though the color is so muted it barely registers. The star sits in the darkness, far away, burning with quiet consistency. It doesn't call attention to itself. It simply exists, one more point of light in the vastness, separated from everything else by enormous distances. The space around that star is empty, just like the space around you. Empty space is the common thread connecting everything out here. Stars are just occasional interruptions in an endless sea of nothing. The emptiness is what defines space, not the stars. The stars are rare. The emptiness is everywhere. You continue drifting through this emptiness. The motion, if there is any, remains imperceptible. You could be moving or you could be still. The darkness looks the same either way. No landmarks pass by. No sense of progress occurs. There's just this ongoing presence in space, this quiet existence surrounded by dark. More time passes or seems to pass. The concept of time feels strange out here, stretched and distorted by the lack of change. Without events to mark the passage of moments, time becomes abstract, almost meaningless. There's just this continuous now, extending forward without variation, dark and quiet and empty. The darkness ahead looks the same as the darkness behind. The darkness to the sides looks the same as the darkness above and below. It's all one continuous space, dark and empty, wrapping around everything. You rest somewhere within this darkness, drifting or resting, existing in this vast quiet. Another faint point of light is visible now, or perhaps it's been visible all along and you're only noticing it now. The star is dim, barely distinguishable from the surrounding darkness. It might be red, an old star burning cool and slow, or it might be white, a more common type. From this distance, it's difficult to tell. The light is so faint that color becomes almost irrelevant. The distance to that star is vast. Light from it has been traveling for years, moving through empty space at enormous speed, and yet it still appears dim and far away. The space between you and that star contains almost nothing. A few scattered particles, some photons of light passing through, but mostly just empty space, dark and quiet. You drift through this region, and the region remains unchanged by your passage. The darkness doesn't part or shift. The emptiness doesn't respond. You move through it like a thought moving through silence, leaving no trace, causing no disturbance. The space simply continues being what it is. Time moves forward in its vague way. Hours might pass, or minutes, or some other measure of time that has no name. The darkness persists. The silence persists. The emptiness persists. Everything remains in its state of quiet continuation, dark and still and vast. Another star becomes visible, this one off to one side, faint and distant like all the others. The light from it isolated, having traveled through space for years before reaching this point. The star itself might have changed in that time, might have grown slightly dimmer or slightly brighter, but from here there's no way to know. You see only the light that left it years ago. The darkness around that star extends outward in all directions. No other stars are visible nearby. The nearest neighbor might be light years away, too far to see from here, too far to matter. The star exists in isolation, alone in its region of space, surrounded by vast spheres of empty darkness. You continue your slow drift through this emptiness. The motion feels more like a state of being than actual movement. You're here in the dark, and the dark is here around you, and time passes while nothing much changes. The stars remain distant. The darkness remains dark. The quiet remains unbroken. There's a quality to this quiet that's hard to describe. It's not peaceful in an active way. It's not tense or expectant. It's simply quiet. The absence of sound. The absence of activity. The absence of anything that might create noise or disturbance. Just this ongoing silence that fills all of space. More time passes. The darkness continues. The emptiness continues. The drifting continues. There's no variation in any of it. No change to mark one moment as different from another. Just this steady continuation of dark space, empty and quiet, extending in all directions without end. You might notice another star now, or you might not. The darkness is so complete that stars are easy to overlook unless you're specifically looking for them. And even then, they're so faint that you might not be sure if you're seeing a star or just imagining one. The darkness creates uncertainty, makes distant lights questionable. The space around you is filled with this darkness. It wraps around everything, surrounds everything, fills every gap between things. The darkness is more present than the stars, more constant than any light. It's the default state of space, the condition that exists everywhere except in the immediate vicinity of stars. You drift through this darkness or rest within it, and it makes no difference to the darkness. It continues regardless, dark and empty and vast, patient and still, requiring nothing, changing nothing. Simply being dark space, extending infinitely in all directions. Another region of emptiness opens ahead. No stars visible in this direction, just pure darkness stretching outward. You move toward it or through it, and the darkness remains consistent. It doesn't deepen or lighten. It's just dark, the same dark it's always been, unchanging and neutral. Time continues its passage. The darkness continues its presence. The emptiness continues its existence. Everything remains in this state of quiet continuation, moving forward without drama or excitement, just persisting in the way that space persists, dark and empty and still. You might see a faint glow somewhere in the distance. Or you might not see anything at all. The darkness is so complete that it's hard to be sure what you're seeing. Faint impressions of light might be real or might be illusions. The darkness creates both, makes it difficult to distinguish between actual distant stars and imaginatons. The space continues. The quiet continues. The darkness continues. There's a sameness to it all that makes it easy to let your mind wander away completely. You don't need to observe any of this. You don't need to track the stars or measure the darkness. It all continues whether you're paying attention or not. Another star appears in the distance, or perhaps you're just noticing it now. The star is faint, barely visible, a small point of light against the vast dark. It doesn't stand out. It doesn't demand attention. It's just there, burning quietly, releasing light that spreads out into the void. The darkness around that star is the same darkness that surrounds you. It's all connected, all part of the same vast empty space. The star interrupts the darkness only locally, only in its immediate vicinity. Beyond that small region, the darkness continues uninterrupted, dark and empty and still. You drift onward through this space. The motion, if any, remains gentle and imperceptible. The darkness doesn't change with movement. It looks the same from every angle, from every position. Just dark space, empty space, quiet space extending in all directions. More time passes in its unclear way. The darkness persists. The silence persists. The emptiness persists. Everything continues in its state of quiet existence, dark and still and vast. Moving forward without change or variation. Another faint point of light is visible somewhere in the distance. Another star, dim and far away. The light from it is weak, diminished by the enormous distance it has traveled. The star itself is unremarkable, just another one of billions scattered through the galaxy, each one separated from the others by vast expanses of empty space. The darkness between you and that star is filled with almost nothing. Empty space. A few atoms scattered here and there. Some particles of dust drifting slowly. But mostly just emptiness, dark and quiet, extending across the distance without interruption. You continue through this emptiness. The darkness continues around you. The quiet continues unbroken. There's just this ongoing drift through space, this gentle movement through darkness, this quiet existence within the vast empty cosmos. Time moves forward. The darkness moves with it, or the darkness simply remains while time passes through it. The distinction doesn't matter. There's just this continuation of dark space, empty and quiet, persisting in its usual way. Another star becomes faintly visible, this one with a pale color that might be white or might be light blue. It's hard to tell from this distance. The star is dim, far away, unremarkable. Just another point of light in the vastness, burning steadily, releasing energy into the void. The space around that star extends outward in all directions, dark and empty. The nearest other star might be years away, too far to see, too far to interact. The star exists alone in its region of space, surrounded by emptiness, isolated by the vast distances that separate everything out here. You drift through the darkness and the darkness remains dark. You drift through the emptiness and the emptiness remains empty. You drift through the silence and the silence remains unbroken. Everything continuous in its state of quiet persistence, dark and still and vast. More time passes. The darkness continues. The emptiness continues. The quiet continues. There's no variation, no change, no disturbance. Just this ongoing presence of dark space, extending infinitely, surrounding everything, filling every gap between the rare islands of matter. You might notice another faint glow in the distance. or you might not notice anything at all. The darkness is so complete that distant lights are easy to miss, easy to overlook. And even when you do see them, they're so faint that they barely register, barely make any impression against the overwhelming dark. The space continues its existence. The darkness continues its presence. The emptiness continues its persistence. Everything remains in this state of quiet continuation, moving forward without drama, without excitement, without change. Another star appears somewhere ahead, faint and dim, far away and unreachable. The light from it is old, having traveled through space for years. The star burns steadily, releasing energy that spreads outward in all directions, most of it traveling forever through empty space without ever hitting anything. The darkness around that star is the same darkness that fills all of space, dark and empty and vast. The star interrupts it only slightly, only locally. Beyond that small interruption, the darkness continues unchanged, extending in all directions without end. You continue your drift through this darkness. The motion remains gentle and imperceptible. The darkness remains dark. The emptiness remains empty. The quiet remains unbroken. Everything continues in its usual way, persistent and unchanging. Time passes. The darkness persists. The silence persists. The emptiness persists. There's just this ongoing state of being in space, surrounded by dark, existing within the vast quiet that fills most of the universe. Another faint point of light is visible now. Another star, distant and dim. The star sits in the darkness, far away, burning with quiet consistency. It doesn't interact with you. It doesn't notice your presence. It's simply continuous, being a star, releasing light into the void, existing in its isolated region of space. The space between you and that star is empty. Dark space stretching across vast distances. No obstacles, no interruptions, just emptiness extending from here to there, dark and quiet and still. You drift through this emptiness and it remains empty. You move through this darkness and it remains dark. You exist within this quiet and it remains quiet. Everything continues in its state of persistent calm, dark and still and vast. More time passes in its vague way. The darkness continues in its constant way. Emptiness continues in its persistent way. There's just this ongoing presence of space, dark and empty and quiet, extending infinitely in all directions. Another star becomes visible in the distance. Faint and unremarkable, white or pale yellow. The light from it is weak, diminished by distance. The star burns steadily, releasing energy into the surrounding space, most of the energy traveling forever without reaching anything. The darkness around that star extends outward in all directions. Empty space. Dark space, quiet space. The star exists within this darkness, a small point of light in an ocean of dark, isolated and alone. You continue through the darkness. The motion remains slow and gentle. The darkness remains dark and vast. The quiet remains unbroken and complete. Everything continues in its usual state, persistent and unchanging. Time moves forward. The darkness moves with it. The emptiness persists within it. There's just this continuation of space, dark and empty and quiet, existing in its normal state. Another faint glow appears somewhere in the distance. Or perhaps it's been there all along. Or perhaps it's not there at all. The darkness makes it difficult to tell. Faint lights blend into the dark, become uncertain, questionable. The space continues. The darkness continues. The quiet continues. Everything remains in its state of persistence, dark and empty and still, extending infinitely without change or variation. You drift onward through this space. The darkness surrounds you. The emptiness fills everything. The quiet persists unbroken. There's just this ongoing existence within dark space, quiet and still and vast. More time passes. The darkness persists. The emptiness persists. The quiet persists. Everything continues in its usual way, dark and still and patient, moving forward without drama or disturbance. Another star is visible somewhere in the distance, faint and dim, far away and alone. The star burns quietly, releasing light that spreads out into the void, growing weaker as it travels, eventually fading into the dark. The darkness around that star is the same darkness everywhere, dark and empty and vast. The star interrupts idly, slightly, only locally. Beyond that small region, the darkness continues unchanged, extending infinitely in all directions. You continue your drift through this darkness. The motion remains imperceptible. The darkness remains constant. The quiet remains complete. Everything continues in its state of persistent calm. Time passes, darkness persists, emptiness persists, quiet persists. There's just this ongoing state of being in space, surrounded by dark, existing within vast emptiness. Another faint point of light appears in the distance. Another star, dim and far away. The light from it is weak, barely visible. The star sits in the darkness, burning steadily, existing in isolation. The space between you and that star is empty. Dark space extending across distance. No interruptions, just emptiness, dark and quiet and still. You drift through this emptiness. The darkness continues around you. The quiet continues unbroken. Everything remains in its state of calm persistence. More time passes. The darkness continues. The emptiness continues. The quiet continues. There's just this ongoing presence of dark space extending infinitely, persisting eternally. Another star becomes visible, faint and unremarkable, distant and alone. The star burns quietly in the darkness, releasing light that fades into the void. The darkness surrounds everything. Empty space fills everything. Quiet persists through everything. There's just this continuation of space, dark and empty and still. You continue through the darkness. Time continues through the darkness. Everything continues in its usual way, persistent and unchanging, dark and quiet and vast.